Captain Hunter from Captain Hunter's podcast. Thank you so much for checking out this particular video. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. So thank you so much for checking out this particular episode. I got a good one for you today. It's going to be more of an audio type of thing, so you can go for your walk, put this in while you're working out, etc., and just get your stuff done. So I am going to be interviewing, trying to get back into doing some interviews here. A good brother, HiiScholar. He has a YouTube channel. I'm sure I'll put a lot of the thumbnails and things up on his YouTube channel as well, and so we can check them all out. So HiiScholar, his real name is Dr. Quincy Brewington. He's from North Carolina, but he currently lives in the Atlanta metro area. He currently teaches between 6th and 12th grade. He's a former assistant professor. He has a PhD in educational psychology, applied cognition and development. His areas of focus are human motivation, Black boys, men, and Black male studies. He's married with 2 children, a son and a daughter. He was so kind enough to come onto the show and to grace me with his knowledge, wisdom, as we have these discussions about how we save our youth, what's going on in the school systems, how we save our young Black boys. That is becoming a great and increasing passion of mine, and all that. So without further ado, everyone, let's listen to Dr. Quincy Brewington, AKA HiiScholar. Thank you so much for coming on. Make sure that you hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on Captain Hunter's podcast. I really, really appreciate it. I'm here with my man, HiiScholar. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me always. Thank you for having me on this fine day. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Before we get into it, I haven't interviewed anybody in a little bit, man. I was going strong for a little while, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Let me go back to school. We were shut in for a little bit.
Right.
So I went back to school, man, and I finished up, and now I want to really get back into having some great conversations. And what's driving my motivation these days is, the state of Black America, Black men, and Black youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across you and Dr. Tia Johnson and BGS and a whole bunch of other different individuals, man. You guys are all doing great work and having great conversations. And I know that you're an educator. So I want to give you a little bit of time to really kind of elaborate about what's going on in the whole education space. But before we dive into that, let me just get your background and tell the people who you is and all that kind of stuff.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I go by HiiScholar in this space, but I'm Dr. Quincy O. Brewington, from North Carolina, but currently reside in the Atlanta metro area. Married with 2 children. My degrees are in educational psychology, particularly applied cognition development, and I actually study motivation, the theories of human motivation. And like you said, I've taught everything from 6th grade up to college to this point, and I find myself back in the high school space, really now in the 2nd generation, but we're now like in 2 or 3 hyper generations over the last few years. These students are different at each phase I've been in as far as K through 12, and I think a lot of our conversation is going to be about those differences. I've even in my space, I try to talk more about the relationship aspects of how we can improve using those relationships with young people, particularly Black boys. But we have a lot of work to do, and I think that this conversation is a major part of it. To the guys that you mentioned, Dr. Tia Johnson, BGS, and all the others, I think they are doing a lot more than I am. I'm kind of upstart in this kind of space, but my background is particularly in teaching and learning, but also in training teachers. So I like to contribute in that way.
Oh yeah, man! Don't cut yourself short, man. I I definitely appreciate the work that educators do. I've had a number of educators. My background is law enforcement, so unfortunately, when they don't succeed in your world,
Mm-hmm.
then I used to see them in my world. So my mindset was, okay, let's get them young. Let's get them young. The whole Frederick Douglass ideology. It's better to you can't repair broken men. You got to train these kids as kids. Train them up in the way they should go.
Mhm.
So what brought you into education?
Like many others, I had great teachers, particularly black male teachers, but all types of teachers who were really impactful. I've always had like a teaching and learning kind of personality as an older sibling. I'm one of 5 siblings, so um, I've always had this kind of passion around making sure people are learned and being a person that can help facilitate that. And um, as I went to undergrad, I mean, to be completely honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I always knew I wanted to serve. And teaching is a way that you can always, serve and be impactful in people's lives. I fell into history because I always had a great social studies teachers. Um, so at the K through 12 level, I've always taught social studies, and at the college level, I do kind of the ed psych kind of stuff. So having great teachers is always going to lean to itself to more to great teachers, but it can be problematic too whenever you have these kind of wonderful teachers and um, people want to emulate those teachers, but need to have the personality. So teaching is an art form. It's a craft that you have to have the kind of intangibles to be a great teacher. So I fell into it because I met a lot of those people who had those intangibles.
I can appreciate that, man. I don't I had a few good black teachers. Um Mostly they were ladies, but there was a few men. But yeah, definitely having a great experience with black teachers, period, I think can really set kids on the right trajectory.
And I
Talk a
was
little bit of Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was fortunate. I'm from the South, and I grew up in the kind of Bible black belt. So I had a lot of black teachers. I had to, reflect on that when I became a teacher, how fortunate and in many ways sheltered I was, where I went to Title One schools in many ways, but these Title One schools were had people who in the late 90s still teaching, black nationalism, black pride, and still kind of standing on that as things were deteriorating within the community. And because of that, until I got into the profession, I didn't see the numbers and statistics that everybody talks about. So to me, teachers have always been black. I had a few white women teachers, but they existed in a black space. So it was something that, even having to expand my view and understand what many of our students are engaging in the current classroom, it looks very different than the mid to late 90s.
All right, yeah, we definitely got to jump into that. So I had a couple of questions here. So let's talk about you mentioned you grew up in North Carolina, correct? Did I heard that right? Right.
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Okay. So and that's where you experienced the black teachers.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now you talked about the changes that have come along with black teachers
Hmm.
and the changes that are going on today. And you talked about a little bit of the black pride. Did the black teachers that you had, male and female, talk about black pride? Talk about the importance. I mean, was there? Do you think that there was? And I know you were young. Do you think there was a difference in the curriculum? For example, if you went to a more white, I know it was desegregated at the time, but more white jurisdiction versus a black jurisdiction, do you think that the teachers put a little spin on the importance of black excellence? Do you think any of that was going on?
And very much so. I think it was, I mean, the spin is probably the best way to say it because I think nowadays with the, requirements, you can be intimidated to put that kind of spin on it. What I would say is my black teachers knew they were in the classroom for something beyond the curriculum. And they
Mhm.
made sure that they gave everything beyond the curriculum they were supposed to give to the black students in front of them. And they did that best in the black space that we were able to be in. But even when I found myself in mixed spaces, they found ways to communicate to me. Not that there's a different standard, but there's a dedication to deliver this education that may be different. Partly, just because we have the same ethnic heritage and history, and you're required to perform it a certain way and at a certain level. I'm going to, press you and impart upon you and do things for you that are because we have this, similar lineage. So um, it was definitely a part of who they were as a teacher. That's the best way I can kind of frame it. That they had a curriculum they were required to teach because they were, required by law in the state of North Carolina. However, they also knew that they had time, with students who were happened to be black, and they had to also impart the cultural dynamics that need to be in our group. I feel like school teachers are doing the kind of group work of culture. While you are getting culture at home, you learn some of the kind of group cultural dynamics in the school and other organizations in the community, churches, etc.
Very good. You talk about culture. I want to get back to that in a second here, but contrast everything you just said about they had a purpose greater than educating, uh, building upon culture that they were getting at home.
Hmm.
What's going on? What would you say is going on today, in particular with any other Black teachers that you know? Is it a difference? Is it the same type of focus and emphasis on culture, the spin? Uh, Contrast that what's going on today.
I think today you have a what happened over the course of time is the Black teaching force aged. You had a lot of new organizations that became pipelines into a lot of our counties that you would find most of our Black teachers are going to be in our metros. So Black teachers are where you find most Black people. So if you don't have a large Black population in your city or a metropolitan, you're not going to find a lot of Black teachers. And then when you have the changing curriculums with their accountability, during the golden era of accountability, Common Core now and thereafter, it's really intimidating to the young Black teacher to know, how do I fit in this kind of Black nationalism, and the question even comes, do they see it as a place in the classroom? Do they see it as something that needs to be shared? They're also going through a kind of cultural synergy and synthesizing that they may not feel that they need to have this kind of cultural background and cultural framework to teach in the classroom. They're being taught in college education that there needs to be multiculturalism. There needs to be this kind of ready to teach everybody. And I came in education looking to teach people who look like me. I had told my, supervising teacher, send me to a Title I school. Luckily, she didn't do that at the time, but it was just something that, every Black teacher nowadays is not necessarily trying to teach Black students or feel the need that they need to bring that spin into the classroom, and or feel that they have the space to. So it could be a combination of those problems, but I would say the biggest one is the last one that I said, which is they don't know where the space is, or the fear of their losing their job around teaching, this kind of Black pride, Black nationalism, um, spin that we need in addition to the curriculum, to push the Black community through education.
So I was going to ask, and why don't Black teachers have that same level of adherence to Black, pride? And I think you just answered it. There is a fear that they're going to lose their job. Is that correct?
That's the probably the biggest part of it. The major part with the auxiliaries being their personal, where they are personally with cultural identity, and a lot. I know from conversations with a lot of teachers, we have our own um, vantage points on how where the Black community should go. Believe it or not, of the population of Black teachers, a lot of Black teachers are conservative, Black conservative. I would definitely say, which is not problematic, but a lot of people don't know that. But we work for many of our states. We want the best for our communities, but we sometimes find it through through a conservative lens more so than a liberal lens. So um, those factors kind of have started to limit the conversation around Blackness and what it means to be Black as a group in a lot of our schools that we identified by the counties and state as primarily Black schools.
I did not know that a majority of Black teachers were conservative. I would have thought that they were more liberal, quite because they were going along with these different ideas that these different points that are being pushed nowadays. I would have thought that they were just that they agreed with a lot of the policies, a lot of the trainings, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a lot more split than people would lead on to. And that's what I'm really leaning to. Like, people would think that it would be an overwhelming majority, kind of liberal ideals amongst Black teachers, and I'm pretty sure between qualitative data and quantitative data, just pulling voting, you'd be surprised how Black teachers are. The views that they have personally around just social dynamics, and that's just understanding that there are liberal and conservative views within a culture that may still not be lockstep with larger American conservatism or liberal ideals.
Do teachers in general, but Black teachers in particular, have any say in the curriculum, or is it all made by policymakers, unions, and state legislators? I mean, talk about how this stuff gets into the classroom.
The final decisions are being made at the top, so by the legislators and policymakers, at the state level primarily, and it kind of trickles down. I hate to use that kind of concept, but it definitely trickles down from there. There's still some. Your state will give some leeway to counties making certain decisions on curriculum. So that's where the intimidation, around job comes around. Like, there's so much information around what the state is requiring and the county is requiring for you to do in the classroom, perform in the classroom. You may not think that there's a space or a way to, include culturally relevant conversations, culturally, conversation around cultural pride. Even in a lot of our schools, there's still the diversity, even if the school is primarily Black, that, you, the teacher, may feel like I can't have a quote unquote Black conversation with all of these, other folk, if you will, and other people in the room. And, that wasn't necessarily like we didn't have diversity in the mid to late 90s, but they may feel differently about that diversity and how those students feel during that conversation. What would they, how would they engage with that conversation? So the intimidation comes from most of that curriculum decision, even though they're going to tell you need to put your own kind of spin on it, your own sauce on it. You have your own kind of autonomy within the room. Um, Most of the decisions are being made at the policy level, and you're going to get it from your administrators at the kind of county and within your school. And as a new young teacher, you don't know, similar to any job or career, you don't know all the space that you may have for that autonomy versus just replying to emails and being a robotic performing person performing in a classroom. And a lot of teachers, because they're fairly new, Black teachers particularly find themselves being particularly robotic. They just do what they're being told to do, and that's the best they can do at this point.
Mm. Yeah. Is there a great level of frustration over those type of concepts, man? I mean, you guys talk, or do you?
Absolutely. I mean, that's across the board. I wouldn't even leave that exclusive to just Black teachers, but teachers have especially if they're truly passionate about the craft of teaching and pedagogy, they never want to be completely limited to a schedule or pacing guides and um, rigid directives on what they need to be teaching in their classroom. Like, teachers love to, teach things that they're passionate about, and find ways to connect with students. But, in this current era, especially since accountability became a major, major concept within education federally, not just at the state level, there's been less room for teachers to kind of meander and go into those kind of projects that people remember in the mid to late 90s and even before. That your teacher loved Greek mythology, and they were particularly they particularly specialize in Greek mythology in their English college, college of education in English at their school. So they did this elaborate project that may have taken 3, 4, or 5 months of a school year. That may not be happening because the school system in that state and county will not allow you to spend 3 months on just Greek mythology. So this is why some of those experiences are not happening. They're trying to standardize things at the federal and state level, and that when you start thinking about laws and policies, when you're being oriented to education, you think that you're going to lose your job if you don't stay on this pacing guide, and you learn very quickly that the pacing guide will be upset by a myriad of things. So it's not like you're going to be perfect at your job, but you're going to see that there's a lot of moving parts, and you have to figure out how you have the best impact. So as I coach teachers up, I teach them, how to do the standards of your job, and what else are you here in the classroom for? Like, what are you really here for? Because we all have a deeper mission and purpose, and this is the way you can add that as a part of your sauce for being a good teacher.
So it sounds like the education, and I'm going to use the word hijacked. I'm not saying that's your word, but it sounds like it's been hijacked by the super elites in Washington, and it sounds like that it's been taken out of the hands of local, um, you know, parents, individuals, local school boards to teach what they think. Is that good or bad?
And this is why I mentioned that Black teachers can be a bit conservative as far as in their ideals, because that's where there's some kind of synergy and synthesis there with, certain parties as far as how they see the role of education. Like, education is localized. I can only educate you within your, home environment. My examples in every subject matter have to be relevant to what you can see, feel, and how far you've gone and what you've been exposed to. So, absolutely, that's where the frustration comes from, where it's like, no, I can't, even in any state, whether it be North Carolina, Georgia, I can't teach the same things in North Carolina that I teach in Georgia, even though we're all in the same region. There's still going to be some differences that I have to account for, and teachers feel like we as professionals know best how to teach what we do in our local area, and how we've interpreted, the policy changes at the, county, state, and federal level has been kind of a disrespect to the profession. If you're in a state that has a union, the South generally doesn't have unions. That's what the pushback, and they like to get some contributions from teachers when it comes to curriculum decisions. However, that's still going to happen at that kind of committee level, at the ideation phase. But at the final cut, there's not going to be a lot of people who have frontline experience. I know in a lot of areas where there's human services, the issue that you have is the decision makers are oftentimes not people who have relevant experience at the front lines, and they have to kind of use whatever qualitative and quantitative information they can gather, along with the stakeholders who are, they're beholden to make those good decisions. And in education, they've done a good job of fixing things where the only person who feels the brunt of a lot of decision makings has been the teacher. So the student, has their own experience, but it's relatively easy because not many students fail. No child is left behind. The parents are kind of left off the hook because, we've taken on a lot of the responsibilities. Once we get the child, we transport them, we feed them, all those things that we now have at the state and federal levels. And there's a lot of support services that we pay for. We spend a lot of money on support services and tools for the teacher to use and to have around the teacher. So there's an idea that there's no excuse why the teacher cannot perform well. So that's another impact that the state and federal policies have had on the role of the Black teacher and all teachers, kind of broadly.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. That's interesting. You mentioned no child left behind. Has that been good, bad? What are your thoughts about that?
I think I'll take it two ways. It's been bad, in short, but first it was bad because it kind of crystallized the accountability idea. So standardized testing is something that we can't undo that. It's hard for us to take tests away from schools now. But I think, more recently I've been thinking about even the phrasing of it. And the phrasing of it has now put us as in a social mindset that's a goal. And teachers can also be crude. I like Abbott Elementary because it shows that there's a crude, kind of a crude or, way that we think about, teaching and learning in the classroom. And most teachers, after you get in there for a long time, you learn that students will fail. You're going to see the statistics play out in your classroom, especially at the high school level. High school graduation rate should probably be, when we're doing really well, somewhere in the 70s. Like 72%, I would think like, oh, okay, I can trust that a county is doing 72% because I know, there's a significant population that's not going to be able to, attain the education, just the intellectual side of what high school is presenting. They may need to go a different track. And we may need to have something in the community for those people who go a different track and who just choose because of whatever, dynamics they have around them, that they don't want to do schooling this way anymore. They've done it up until this, certain age, and they're kind of going to go away from it. But teachers know that dynamic is going to play out before them. And we have to do our best to, make sure that it's not a gross number, but we still know it's going to play out. No Child Left Behind now put in people's mind in our communities, then there's no child in the community that's going to fail. Like, we're going to have 100% success rate with every child who comes into a public school building. And I'm not sure any career where that's going to be the standard. Like that 100% can be the threshold. We wish, but we're even seeing nowadays that airplanes have doors flying off. So teachers have a higher standard than some of these other things that are now, also should have 100% success rate. But that's what No Child Left Behind, to me, as a policy, has put out there as a federal policy. But even in the state and counties, we still are trying to project to the community that we're so efficient because we're able to graduate somewhere between 80 and 90% of your students. Even though when you get this person into your, into an interview and into your job, people are just screaming at the hills that this person is not skilled. This person is, not where they should be, but they have a high school diploma. How did this happen? And
Right. Right.
that hasn't always been the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's talk about the importance of black male teachers. Obviously, there aren't enough of them, but what's been your experience as a child experiencing them, and what's your experience now? Do more black students, black male students in particular, gravitate towards you? Talk about that.
First of all, black male teachers is a very small population, so even smaller than the black women teachers. So black teachers are about, like I say, last time I checked, somewhere between 5 and 7% of the population in the country. Of that population, black males make up somewhere between 1 and 2%. Um, and they're going to cluster in, again, the major metropolitans. Um, Part of the reason why black male teachers are needed, especially for the black males in school. They're going to be black males who are going to gravitate to those black male teachers. Um, some some need them and will not gravitate to them, but we can talk about that a little bit afterwards because of the social dynamics that they grew up with.
Mm,
Um, but the profession. So teaching as a profession is something that I'm still grappling with as a black man myself, where to be the head of your household and be a teacher is difficult because the teaching profession in the United States was primarily fitted for a white woman who will be, partnered with a white male. So the salary of teachers is always slow to move because of that dynamic. Um, we still fight, if you're in a state that doesn't have a union, to be paid a respectable wage where you'll be the head of the household. So the reason why black males move up if they stay in education to be, kind of administrative role or something in the central office of a county, or even into those state and federal policymaking roles, accountability roles, is for salary. And that's just you as a professional in your own career. And those who stay in the classroom do it purely out of love and passion, or have somehow fixed their lives in a way where they're able to do this during the day and make additional money to cover that gap of what um, they need to be, financially stable more so than anything. And this career is good when it comes to schedule and okay when it comes to salary. But for many black men, and men in general, but black men particularly, who are not going to come from families that are going to have a lot of, wealth and wealth accrued, we're going to make decisions in a classroom career that may be more personal than, just for our community. So more recently, black men have been in for about 3 to 5 years and then moved up to administration. Maybe 10 years at the most, but they moved to administration, and it's primarily a financial personal move.
mm. And do you think that the kids are suffering because the black male teachers are moving away from the student? I mean, yeah, away from the students and into admin positions.
Absolutely, and even one of the ways that it's hurting the students is how they see black men as a image of society. I talk about this even on my channel that that low born contempt that others talk about for black men in the community. It comes into our schools, and if you don't, we have such a small population of black men who are in a classroom face to face with students one to one that they oftentimes just see us as a part of the overseer. We're always, for many students, we're just, administration. So we're in the hallway kind of barking orders or suspending students or disciplining and meeting with parents. So because in the education space, we've now occupied some of those roles, I think it strains the relationship between us and students, us
Well,
and parents as well. So, um, most of those administrators have all been teachers in some capacity or another, but it is hurting the student particularly. But I think there's more legs on the table that are all impacted, and that's how I see education. It is parents, students, teachers, administration, and we all got to be on the same page for this to hold this thing up. And black men moving out of that classroom, more so into administration, has hurt that kind of space in which we contribute in the classroom, particularly. Like, we have a different dynamic and teaching style in the classroom that I've seen amongst black men, male teachers, that students, oh, this is different. Even when it comes to the aesthetic of the classroom, many of us are very military, and not in a negative way, but coming from law enforcement, that there's a way that you can direct and instruct and command that. Male students particularly, but all students, it can be refreshing when you're in a kind of, more, warm and caring and kind of, feeling and emotional kind of teaching style. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that I've learned from students like, ah, man, I hate journaling. Like, do we have to journal? Just kind of give me the information. So there's different students who, are going to receive, different instructional styles, and black men bring an instructional style that, and black men all have different varying instructional styles. I don't want to say that we're just all military and cut and dry, but black men come with an instructional style that students desire. And I've heard students say, like, man, where have you been in my entire career? And it's like, well, we're so few in number that when you get a good black male teacher, students are like, man, he was everything. And I think, that part of that was my experience, but I had a few black male teachers along my path that they felt like, they were really good at their craft. They also gave me everything on the side, and I was able to come to them and have conversations that I knew they weren't going to blow smoke. They weren't going to just like, oh, you're wonderful, you're great, da, da, da. They were able to communicate with me a level of support, but a level of reality that I got from my father, and I still also got parroted by a good black male teacher. As far as, if you want to be good at this, it's going to require hard work, it's going to require effort, and it's not going to require me being nice and being warm all the time. There's going to be some praise, but there's going to also be some criticism that you need to be, getting used to build yourself up.
Yeah, no, that's important. That's important. I want to kind of continue on with that. The difficulty of parents getting behind you. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, I've always thought that the teachers get way too much blame when the students don't perform to optimal levels, right? Whether it's No Child Left Behind or what was that they wanted to do a few years ago? Some kind of pay per performance type of thing.
Yes.
What's your thoughts about that, and what is the role of the parent in the educational process?
Well, what's happened, the dynamic between black male teachers, black men in our community, is actually a microcosm, and we say this over in black male studies and black manosphere all the time, of what's happening to every other teacher. So there's a lack of trust there in that relationship, and there's a shift of blame. So because there's a lack of trust with the institution of education, particularly around black people, but in general in our community, like, education is being seen as this kind of uh, issue. There's an issue with education and what it is teaching. Is it just creating workers versus creating thinkers, and so on and so forth. So because they use that distrust, they now shift the blame outside the home. Many of in our community, I'll talk about our people. Black students are coming in, and that's why we have pre-K programs in many states. Behind, because they have just been sitting at home watching TV, watching programs. They haven't been getting the education during some very critical years, some priming education, not necessarily the education of reading and writing quite yet, but those activities that prime you ready for those reading and writing education. So the main issues that we're dealing with in our community are a lack of trust with teachers in educational spaces. Like, it's no educational space at this point is going to be perfect, but you need to find an educational space that you can trust with your child's education, and you need to build that trust with the educational system. But also, they've exacerbated many of the issues and shifted the blame to, well, if you can't do it at the school, that means I can't do it at home, and that's not necessarily true. I've heard that a lot of times in conversations with parents, that if I can't somehow get through to their child or as their student, then how do I expect them as a parent to get through their child? And I'm like, I don't come from a cultural background where I understand what you're saying. The parent is usually the first person, the first line of defense to get through to this individual, and we work together to make sure that we use education as a way to motivate this child to go forward in their lives. So, but right now, with that distrust, they just shift the blame back to the education space and use that lack of trust as a weapon. So More recently, I'm a high school teacher now. You hit a kind of soft spot. More recently, I've been accused of having like vendettas against students, and you know, I'm a black man with a PhD. And why would I think your child is that important? Your child is important to me because I want to teach them. They're not important to me that I want to, grind my axe. And I'm a villain in my own community where I live as a teacher. And that was just a micro, just an example of, how parents are thinking of the person who's teaching their child at 8 o'clock on a Monday, Tuesday morning. And that's sad to me, but it's the reality of generations of distrust. And now, the dynamic in our community is people outside are supposed to provide these services that fix what's going on in the household. And teachers are some of the, people who get it the hardest from a lot of our parents.
Brother, I can remember growing up, man. My grandmother and my mother and my aunt would be like, listen, you're going to school to get your education. The teacher has theirs. And, when I would say things like, oh, the teacher don't like me, they would shut it down immediately. We don't,
Hmm.
they would just shut it down. I'm not listening to that. And of course, think about it. My grandmother and aunt and mother all grew up in the 40s and 50s, right?
Hmm.
They didn't want to hear, that the teacher didn't like you and that she's holding you back. So it just floors me, man. You talk about culture, man. It floors me that people are just entertaining that. And when my kids try it, I'm like, listen, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that the teacher don't like you, or the teacher's racist, or I don't want to hear that. I'm not listening to that. You got to do what you got to do. And I think that if the parents shut it down, if they come from a culture where that type of language is entertained, then they're going to keep perpetuating that. And it just makes everybody's job more difficult. And I don't understand that either. I don't come from a culture like that.
And I got to speak to two sides of it. And the first side I'll speak to is absolutely you got to shut it down best you can, because oftentimes this is a child's lens of their experience going through the learning process. So some of the time when children are speaking about a teacher not liking them, they're really talking about an iron sharpens iron experience. And if you've ever had I was a student athlete. Um, I've had people who were mentors who most of the time when I was working with them, I did not like them. I thought they were horrible people. I thought they were just like, why would you sign up to do this if this is how you're going to perform your job? And then at the end of it, when we're crying about a championship, or I'm seeing how much I've improved at whatever skill, this person's the best person ever. And that's what's happening in the classroom sometimes. Um, the second thing I'll say is actually, trying to bring some balance to it, which is my profession has been awful for a very long time. I'm going to say just at least 30 years. My profession is taking a hit because of the individuals in the classroom. What you're seeing at the top at the feds, we've seen that resurgence even in our classroom. So there are situations where students are in a classroom with individuals who do not like them, and they should never be in a classroom. And because of the state of our profession, sadly, we have people in our education system that do not like children, have found themselves into a classroom, and are doing all they can to disturb and sully the name of the good teachers who are in many of our buildings.
Man, that's really, really sad. That's really sad. Um, Talk about the hip hop culture a little bit there. Talk about
Okay.
that. Is that I mean, what are your thoughts about it? Is it hurting, helping? Is it indifferent?
One of the things I write about, because that was one of the areas I studied in graduate school, is, and this is not my words. This is another scholar, escapes me right now, so pardon. But this talks about how hip hop gets too much blame and not enough blame a lot of times. So hip hop gets too much credit for in some situations, and too much blame in certain situations. So I think right now in this current condition, I mean, I lived through I wasn't NWA, but I was more so like coming into it around Wu Tang, as far as the major groups. But I was definitely mid to late adolescence around Juvenile, Hot Boys era hip hop. And what I see with my students is it's almost like I'm going through it, part two. Right now, the goal is more so focused on the girls and young ladies and young women. But hip hop is doing, when you just fall into the most popular versions of it. If you think back to the Hot Boy era, Bling Bling, and the damage it did as far as getting you so focused on the money and the prize that you throw away your late adolescence, you throw away your young adulthood and you find yourself 10, 15, 20 years later, which some of those guys are now being released from prison, um, trying to figure out like how did I fall into this? And it was all the bling. It was all the get it now, get it fast. We heard, the C. Dolores Tuckers and people talk about some of the damage, and we thought as adolescents and young adults, like, no, come on now, we're gonna beat the system. We're gonna we even saw people get assassinated, killed, however you want to say it, and said, well, that's just what happened to them. That's not indicative of the culture. And now that we've come into mid and late adulthood and see how it's quote unquote evolved, but really devolved into something that it is who we are now in 2024. We now, people in my generation are, as every generation should reflect and say, it wasn't really good, guys. Like we need to stop this because hip hop is supposed to have a powerful impact on the youth. It's supposed to be a voice of the youth trying to have that positive impact in some form or fashion. It's not purely just expression. And I just was talking about this a few minutes ago with a friend, and just talking about, again, right now the focus is primarily on the girls and women. And if you compare it to the thug bling bling era of the 90s going into the early 2000s, it's almost lockstep. Like it's every stereotype, negative stereotype about black boys and men. It seemed like hip hop just was in the slot pen about it. And now we're seeing that, not saying that, it was the boys and men who were calling people bitches and hoes, but now, and part of me, if I can't curse on your podcast, but
No,
now,
you're good. You're good.
okay. But now you got the women and girls calling themselves that, and some of the images that we were told that the men are forcing women into this kind of tip drill, I get around, videos. That's not something that women really want to do. They're being forced and allured with money. Now they're saying, no, we wanted to do that. Now we want to be the front person and have more of our girls, shaking that thing in the back of the video. So it's just an interesting dynamic to live through. I appreciate seeing it, and now as a teacher, but also mid adult, I have to make sure I play my role in saying, no, it was bad when we did it, just as much as it's bad now. Um, I see where there can be power and strength within hip hop, within messages. Hip hop has an ability to get messages through to youth in a way that when they come to some of our other black social spaces, I know how it sounds to them because I hear them talk about it in the classroom. Like it's hard for us to remember all the time exactly how it sounded, and redundancy is good. I think we still should beat them over the head a little bit because they need to have it to fall back on because they're going to bump their heads. But purely just having this no holds barred idea about hip hop culture, particularly the hip hop music and how it impacts the culture, I've kind of gone off of that because I've had opportunity to reflect on, oh no, I know what I kind of got from it, but I also had to depart for some, detach from some of the images and beliefs. And even when I turn it on now, as a man who's A, married, and B, a father of two children, one of them, being a girl and one being a boy, like I can't even play my music. Like they got to be at least 18. Like I was just having a conversation with myself. Like my children have to be at a place where I've discussed with them and they understand this is an art form and this is what I grew up on, but this is not something that I want for you. This is something that I enjoy. This is kind of daddy's fun music. I don't even know how to explain it to them because it's not something that I can just turn on differently than my parents' generation of music, where I can't think of, there were maybe a few songs they couldn't turn on, or I had to wait till I was a little older to hear, and those are a little more sensual, seductive songs. But just I can't turn on, 400 Degrees with my 3-year-old. Like it just I want to, but I know as a Southern Christian black man, I feel awful doing that because I know what I'm setting them up for at 3 years old. So I'm kind of moving away from being aloof about the impact of hip hop, but I'm never going to be a person that's going to say hip hop is the only thing to blame. I believe hip hop is actually nestled within black culture and the issues that we've um, been so focused in on hip hop being who we are as a black community and culture.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've actually been gonna start. I've been tasked to be part of a study to look at hip hop from a different lens. I mean, with the criminal justice aspect, as far as the rap lyrics and all that kind of stuff. So, I definitely can understand what you're saying when you mention these types of things. What I, man, it's so crazy. You talked about the impact of boys and girls.
You-
Um,
Well, if I
talk about that a little.
Well, one of
Go
the
ahead.
things I feel like I'll talk about that in what I'm saying because I wanted to add to it as I was continuing to think like Bun B in a documentary talked about having the B sides to a lot of rap music and talked about how one thing he appreciated from a lot of Southern rappers and even some West Coast rappers is how um, who were early in hip hop, how there was always the B side. So, and that was the problem with the rap as it moved into the early 2000s. That it was all bling bling and spinning rims and bravado and big suits and shiny suits, but it was never the feds kicking in the door. It was never the I lost my best friend got killed right beside me. Those things were devoid from the music and when the South kind of got into the music, Texas, Georgia, and many others, they felt like we're going to make sure that there's a completion. It's not going to be all the bravado and I'm the biggest, crime lord in my city. There comes a tax and there's a effect of that, the paranoia and all those things that come along with that. So I feel like we're going to go through another era. I hate to say it, of seeing the impacts of damaging lyrics and images particularly on one demographic. And I hope that the learning is swift, because for my generation of Black boys and men, it's taken a while for us to understand how damaging some of those things were and how uplifting that B sides were. And the B sides are really those things that are powerful for us. So it's the B sides of Tupac. It's the B sides of any artist that you want to say. For me, Outkast and many others of when things were quiet, they sound like James Brown and many others sounded to prior generations. They're talking about times that were quiet and how to make decisions that happen to be over something lyrical and production. So I think we need to be pushing our boys and girls to find that in their music. That's really why they're so deep into this, drill emotional music that they're into. Like when you really, turn it on, for us it's difficult to listen to, but it's like they want to hear more reality, or something more associated with their feelings, something that is actually recognizing that they're not just nihilistic, they're not just hoes shaking their ass. There's way more to them than that. But you know how hip hop does it. Hip hop goes to extremes in the most popular forms of it. So that's another part of the problem that we're dealing with. The hip hop now for the boys and girls is at the extremes of all behaviors. The guns have switches. The girls have a million sex partners, and everybody's doing the extremes because that's what they believe is hip hop culture. A and B, what it means to be black and black in America.
Yeah. So are you confronting that in your schools? You've seen it in school. You're teaching high schools now. They got to be wrestling with that, right? The girls probably how
Oh
many
man.
sex partners they have and all this kind of stuff,
Oh
right?
man, and believe it or not, like I've and this is not my third stint in the classroom. I've gone in and out in many different in different phases of my career. That's what I've realized. Like I'm a social studies teacher first and foremost, but helping them grapple with it. And the best mentors and teachers of high school students are not those who try to answer the question for them. I don't try to answer the question of should you increase your sexual partners or should you go shoot up dude's home where his mother, father, sisters, and grandmother stay. Of course, if those situations are presented, I try to answer as directly as possible. But with any generation of youth, if anybody told you, Captain Hunter, like don't go do this, adolescent Captain Hunter would definitely gonna go do that. So it was really those that question in adolescence, you got to push them back with another question like, so what is the purpose of you doing that? And how does that fit in with your larger purpose? How does that fit in with not only who you see yourself as today, but tomorrow, thereafter? Are you even giving yourself a chance to figure it out? And, I found that being more gratifying for students. And they feel like, these students want to feel human more so than anything. They've always been, relatively autonomous, even if it's been through neglect. So it's really hard tell someone who's really been raising themselves that they don't know what they've been doing. So you just have to kind of question Socratically some of those life choices and what they're seeing in front of them, because they've been inundated in it. Like more so than any other generation, they have been in front of these screens and had full access to um, not only the best of us, but the absolute worst of us. And not just our culture, but all cultures that are found here in America, and even some international. Like I always amazed by even the international content that I see students intaking, not only on TikTok. So I don't even want to make it cliche, where you think it's just TikTok, but like no, on every platform, we have students here in the state of Georgia who are knee deep, waist deep in stuff that is islands and ponds away from them, and they are engaging with it in a way that is serious for them. So, how do we now stop trying to fight the wave and ride the wave to make them the best version of themselves that they want to be within our community still? Because I'm a person that I go back and forth, whether, pessimism and optimism. And I believe that the Black community is still going to be here and thrive. But I think just as any other generation of us has had to deal with and grapple with certain changes that have happened around us, and still figure out what it means to be a Black American community, within this social space.
You're a lot more optimistic about the Black community than I am. Black,
Wait, man.
black, um, Black boys, Black girls, they learn differently. Are we all the same? Should Black boys be educated outside or a different setting away from Black girls, or boys really in general? But what are your thoughts about that? Educating boys and
Um,
girls separately.
so I'm definitely on the separation. It can, the school building can still have one, both in the building, but in the classroom space, I think it's a strength to have kind of single sex, single gender classrooms. I know that's still controversial when you start talking about some of the other dynamics that are going on in education, but I'm a fan of that. I mean, I'm not particularly a specialist in the early formative years, so early education, early childhood education, and elementary education. I would defer to someone who specializes in that. But for middle grades on up, I think I've seen strengths of having, separation, even if that separation is within the classroom, because you'll be able to now be able to identify that there are some subtle, nuanced differences in how boys and girls learn, and they're going to show up the more and more developmentally they become boys and girls. So the earlier education, early childhood education, like my how I'm thinking, it's not as big a difference, because there are subtle, very little difference between boys and girls educationally at their earliest years. But by the time we get to middle school, when they're given some age ranges, 11 to 13, 11 to 13, we start seeing even 10, we start seeing some size differences physically between girls, and it flips over to the boys. So the girls at 10 are towering over the boys, and then by the time we're 13 and 14, it's flip flopped. And um, teaching how those interactions go, we have a lot of issues, and from fifth grade to ninth grade, just teaching boys and girls how to navigate one another in a space. And
Right.
sometimes when you have a single sex classroom, you can have conversations and even dynamics within those spaces that um, are conducive for those single sex or gender classrooms. So conversations in the girls' classrooms will be much different than those conversations and dynamics in the boys' classrooms. So this is why you see a lot of, for those who believe in it, send their students to private schools or military schools, etc.
Yeah. Back to the hip hop question for a second there. About a year ago, or maybe 6 months, I'm terrible with time. There was a couple of teachers that went viral for singing "Sexy Red." Was it "Sexy Red" or one of those two? Or Sukihana's the "Ski Yee" song.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Or what was your thoughts about that? Good, bad, positive? What were your thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm a person that believes that things can change and evolve, but also believe that there's certain things that are not forced. Like there's a time and a place. Again, that's
Mm,
the Southern coming out of it. Hey, there's a time and place for everything.
mm,
And all too often, I've seen education move in the same way that I've seen like the Black church. where like because we just want to keep you engaged and be cool to you, that I'm going to appease you, and that's what I see when I see us going. Like I knew this was coming when I started seeing in my era of them trying to integrate hip hop in the classroom. Like the first time they brought Tupac lyrics in to do a analysis, I was like, I know where this is going. Like you're gonna try. Like even though the concrete does, it grows in the concrete. I get it. I'm here for it. Even as a student, I knew you're going to start ushering in more and more, and eventually, the fox is in the hen house. Like I
Mhm.
believe that there's a reason why these things are separated, and um, even just recently we saw there's a situation with the sexy reds and those kind of going into the school spaces and forgetting what school spaces like. You can't come in here with your cleavage out. We have a dress code at the school. You can't come in here smelling like drug paraphernalia because
Wow.
most schools nowadays have an SRO, and so these are legal state bound spaces that it's just not allowed. And hip hop, always contends with the boundaries and what's allowed and not allowed and policies. We're the music genre in America, if you remember, in the '90s, that pushed the envelope where we got to put the explicit on the album cover. So that was hip hop. So we still, kind of wear that, brandish that kind of way of moving, but I'm not a big supporter. Like my students complain about that. Like I'm like the, not killing drill, but um, the school still can be old school. Like, there's an old school way of teaching and learning that I still believe in. I don't believe that everything has to be new for it to be effective. So students can move around and talk and write on a post-it, a large post-it note, and have a great educational day, and not pick up a computer and do all those things. So I don't always feel like we got to have a music video with the students' music. Like there's an interaction that I believe is happening in the educational space, even amongst parents and child. Like your parents were trying to introduce you to a generation that came before you, while you were also introducing them to the generation that is current and coming, in the future. So they're supposed to be that kind of learning from each other. But if we're just all trying to be in the present of, Sexy Red or whoever, I mean, we could name some male artists too, Young Thug or whoever it is. Um, we're not playing our role. So I'm supposed to play my role as a middle adult and introduce them to music in school that is not hip hop. Some of my students learn or laugh because they're like, "We know you listen to hip hop. There's no way you're a 30-plus-year-old man. That means you're in the hip hop era. I know you listen to all the hip hop, that my dad grew up on." And it's like, yes, but as a teacher, I'm supposed to make sure that this space is, saline and clean and right for education, teaching, and learning. And sometimes I had to learn myself that these certain music genres lend themselves to certain energy, and are good for certain activities. I may listen to rock and roll when I'm working out, but I may not want to listen to my hard rock whenever I'm you know writing my paper. It's going to make it difficult, and many of the parents are not having that conversation. And if you're not a fan of hip hop culture, you're definitely not going to have that conversation in the classroom.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that, and there's always going to be, this push pull that I think that we who enjoy hip hop are always going to have to deal with. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but I was around when and I used to put on Easy E in NWA when I was getting dressed in the morning.
Hmm.
And then a few years later, I become a police officer. I became a police officer in '95, and so we would go into clubs and stuff. And then next thing, and we as the cops had to go in there and break up stuff or whatever. And next thing you know, the DJ starts playing "F the Police." Now,
Hmm.
part of me wanted to bop my head, but the other part of me is like, like, yo, you got to cut this off. So I had to, and of course, as the rookie, the young dude, I had to go over there and tell this dude to knock it off. They were like,
Hmm.
Hunter, get over there and tell this guy to knock it off. I'm like, oh God.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so I can definitely see it. And I remember one time there was in the middle of the summer, there was it wasn't people would come outside the clubs and they would just kind of hang out and they would be blasting music and stuff. And then DMX's Stop Drop Open Up Shop comes on. I'm like, man, this is a hot, and it was the first time I heard it. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
that's not
Uh-huh.
a song. But again, they're like, yo, Hunter, go over and tell this guy to turn the music down. I'm like, hold on, can we wait to the end of the song? So, it was that's always going to be there. Yeah. So I can definitely understand that, there's a time and a place and all that. I definitely get that. But that's what we got to deal with, and as long as, but you and I turned out okay. But how many kids, I think the question is, and this is something I'm looking at in my own study that I'm about to do is how many people are turned off, how many, what is the effect of people being, and by turned off I mean turned down a negative path in life,
Mm-hmm.
because they aren't able to, as Dr. Dre said, separate image from acting, right? And so that becomes the problem, right? If you let them listen to this in schools, or next thing you know, you got artists walking through the schools who have been invited, who are smelling like paraphernalia,
Mm-hmm.
cleavage out,
Mm-hmm.
and then the students are looking at this like, man, this is and they may not be able to process it on the higher levels, but they're thinking, okay, this is acceptable in the school environment. I don't have to, maybe education isn't that important, or this way that they're trying to teach me isn't that important, and it's hard to walk that fine line between, again, image and acting. Where is reality come in at, and where is this, um where do we need the academics of it, so it becomes a difficult to navigate.
And because we're limited in America as Black Americans, Black in America, we feel like everything has to happen everywhere. We weren't always that people. I was a history major in undergrad, so studying Black people, just understanding how um, we would consider them prudish almost when you think about, like, they literally were like, this doesn't happen here, like this is not happening in this space where we don't see church folk in the juke joint. Like, those people
Right.
don't, those not the same people. But in my era, I think that the pastor can be in a juke joint. It makes sense to me. Like, why not? Those are the people you need to be preaching to. But it's like, you keep seeing pastor over in a juke joint too many times, you're going to start realizing the pastor is not, he's not, he or she, and that nowadays is not walking in the what you believe is the word, or what you believe is the image of the clergy. And
Right.
as a
Right.
Black person, I'm starting to, I think I'm playing my role as a middle adult and becoming an elder when I say, like, no. I expect the pastor to maybe go there and preach 1 or 2 times. But if he or she's a weekly, or nightly visitor to the juke joint, then we're gonna know what they're on.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely, that is always a struggle as to how often should they go to different, yeah, juke joints, or how long should you stay at different parties and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that is certainly something, that familiarity will eventually breed contempt.
Right.
I think I don't know how much you've been following, but I think that TD Jakes may have that issue with with P Diddy, if any of these allegations are true, or anything like that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I've been following it loosely because I'm a, again, Black, Christian, man. So this is always something. He's in the South, and he's been a major figure in that space. So um, that is a, that again, when you saw the mega church preacher, and particularly the Black mega church preacher, we had already had the Daddy Graces and the C.L. Franklins, I mean, I don't want to all mention them in the line, but the Martin Luther King. So the big name Black preacher, Black male preacher, is not new. And there are those before them. I mean, we can name a lineage of Black preachers who've been kind of the social group leaders. That even that image, that's a whole other show, just so you know. That's the image of the Black male as a leader, particularly a religious leader, has taken a large hit. And I think TD Jakes is just another. We're gonna add him as a file if the allegations are true. These are all allegations, but if anything is found in the court of law in association with someone else, um, I think it's just going to be another scarlet letter on the name and reputation and image, which I agree with Kevin Samuels. Like, the image of Black men is one of the things that I try to, make sure that I call out when people are playing with it. And the Black men as a spiritual leader, as a religious leader, and community leader, that image has been toyed with for far too long. And I think TD Jakes, if the allegations are true, are only going to add to the difficulty that we find to be spiritual, religious leaders or leaders in any other capacity.
Yeah, man, I can definitely understand that, and I always try to we definitely talk about that at another time because I definitely agree that we really have to do more about our collective image. Thus the hip hop conversation, thus the conversations about so many other arenas, man, and it's just really sad and problematic that we have to continue to talk about this. Um, we can wrap this up, man. Talk about your YouTube channel a little bit.
Okay, well, right now I'm still it's still a work in progress as far as what I'm doing on YouTube. I have a couple episodes a couple episodes of both live shows and pre-recorded shows that I talk about, things from my specialty, both kind of academic things, but more recently I've been trying to use my academic intellect and what I know from research to speak more candidly and openly about what I know and what I'm seeing out here. And I kind of been niched more recently around kind of black boys, black men relationships, attachments. Um, been talking a lot about, I did a show about Ali Sadiq's, loss and how black boys are, kind of pushed away from detaching or knowing how to detach. There's not a lot of scaffolding on, death and grieving when it comes to black boys. And we experience it the most. Like we experience it more than any other, identity as far as untimely death and loss. And many people who we would seek support from will kind of, brush it off. And even talking about, learning as a black boy how to turn down the advances of girls and women that you really don't want to engage. So that's really where my new YouTube channel is going more recently. I'm just talking about I motivation talks about attachments and relationships a lot in the research, so I have a lot of knowledge around your motivation to attach, and I've been trying to use that more recently in my YouTube channel. I got a couple of things I've been cooking up. If I talk about some things coming up, I really want to talk about how the black community and our relationships in the households is straining the relationship between the teacher and student. Teacher-student relationships are old, but I think that they are being strained by the dynamics that we have in our households, where um, there's not both parents who will be the original teachers of the student. I mean, of the child. So that's where I'm going
Ye-
as time progresses. Get back on that.
Oh,
So
well, I did want to ask you about that, man. We can finish off with this, man. What is your thoughts about? I know we both said we listen to a lot of the Black Manosphere content.
mhm.
What is your thoughts about the Black Manosphere? The state of relationships. We talked about you were a lot more optimistic about the Black community, its future than I. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts about what's going on, and how does that play into everything?
I think we're coming into another phase. I don't know how many phases you would say has happened thus far, but I think the Black Manosphere, which is separate from Black male studies, but has some people who traverse, in both spaces. I think that they have pushed the needle, and we're starting to see some of the residuals of that needle pushing, um, and it's going to continue to do so. I think Dr. Tia San Johnson, one thing I really applaud and appreciate he's done is started to build things that are digestible by people on both ends, both the participants and people like me and you who may listen, but also policymakers and people who have influence around strategies and policies for them to understand why people are talking. So, as a person who does the research and also has been a kind of strategy implementation person in my career, in my work, um, that's the hardest part to do. Like to take it from these kind of free conversations on YouTube to actual, black and white policy that you can now push for. So I think that we're doing well in that. I have to make sure we elevate, Kevin Samuels and the very many others who have made sure that they've kind of taken a lot of the hits that comes with, pushing the black male image and talking about things that make people very uncomfortable. Black boys and black men are really relegated to shut up and do what I tell you to do. But this new generation in the black manosphere, where you have these open forums to hear all these different vantage points, like I love to just hear the diversity in opinions, just to hear the diversity within black men to understand that we need to have more conversations to figure out what we want, because it is a myriad of opinions, as well as knowing that there are some things we need to do for every Black man, every Black boy, Black man, Black male, policy-wise, as far as infrastructure in society, that I'm glad that we have Black male studies, as well as, certain individuals in the Black manosphere, to make sure that we're pointing in that direction. Like, this phase has felt, I was kind of getting into it in the earliest phases. I will speak candidly about, like, there's parts of the Black manosphere that you won't find me in a lot of those conversations, or I won't be as loudest about those things. But that's just a personal choice. That's just a personality. Like, I'm not a. You can kind of see my personality now. Like, I'm not. I can get intense, but you have to be more 1-to-1 in my face to get me to yell, scream, and cuss too much. Um, I haven't had bad luck with women necessarily, and not necessarily that has saved me from anything. But I listen and understand that they're having these experiences and they're authentic and real. But I always make sure that I'm trying to be myself when I'm engaging on my YouTube channel. So I love that the Black male studies and Black manosphere allows for that, and doesn't ask for me to be more boisterous, be more. Um, Everybody has their lane. And I think that I love that BGS particularly talks about there's a need for just more. There's a need for more, so that we can show the diversity and show that there's a need for infrastructure, so that Black men from different avenues can contribute to society in the ways that we see different identities have opportunity to, and show the different, who they are and the differences.
Yeah, no, I definitely can agree with that, and I do appreciate what they're doing. I plan to join Tia San's. I think it's the Onyx Report or something like that, where
Hmm.
he's got classes about that, and because I've never taken a Black Studies, feminist course or anything like that. I've only taken even as a psychology major, I never really studied any of that. So when they're going through different policies and things, I mean, there's different policies that I've read along the way,
Right.
um, but never really made the connections to the Kerner Commission, and I've read the Moynihan Report, but it never really kind of clicked the way that they're making it click, that this is driving or has driven a lot of the ideologies that I would imagine that you're dealing with in the classroom, that's coming out in the pulling back and the scaling back of Black boys from not wanting to, or to really just men in general. What's going on with Black men, right? It's because of all these different policies. So I really think that they're doing a great job with connecting these dots and painting a puzzle, and as they say, giving us the language, the
Right.
vocabulary to be able to understand, what's happening, and be able to fight back against this type of stuff. And I'm glad, to your point, that many policy people are listening, and hopefully there can be some serious changes. I don't see personally how they can allow. Well, I think I can see it. Well, how they can allow for the whole passport bro movement to grow and blow up to the level that it is. But I guess the answer to that is you just import immigrants, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because if you have if you have 20 something year olds who are now saying I'm not gonna date anymore, I'm not going to be involved anymore, and they're going to go overseas, or even people my age, 40s and 50s, retiring over there in more than they ever did before, then I can't see how that's not a security risk financially, as well as military readiness. I just
Hmm.
don't, I just can't see that. So, you know, but those are different conversations we all need to have. So,
Absolutely.
uh, I'll give you the last word, brother. Anything else you want to cover in this time?
Well, I really wanted to say thank you for having me. I've been kind of quiet for the last few weeks, so I appreciate the opportunity to get back on here and um, keep working at this. Like you said, we're doing some consciousness raising, and that's the part of the movement that we're in. And we don't know exactly how far this is going to go, and are preparing for those changes that are going to come down the pike. But we know there's still difficulties along the way, so also preparing ourselves for those kind of pushbacks that are going to come back. They're going to come as we continue to do this work. So as we usher ourselves into a new phase, I look forward to continuing this consciousness raising, and also the strategy and implementation that's going to come in the coming year. So thank you for having me, Captain Hunter, and That's all, HiiScholar. You know, I'm amazed but never surprised.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to keep this conversation going, man. I'd like to have you back on. I plan to reach out to the other brothers that we mentioned now that I'm trying to get back into it, man. Really get some panel discussions going, one-on-ones, all this kind of stuff, man. Because yes, consciousness raising is important. Establishing where we want to go, how we're going to get there. It's all important, man. And I know that a lot of people want to give up on the Black community. I don't. I think it's going to be a struggle, but I'm really concerned about the youngsters, man. The people that you're teaching. I coached for a lot of years. People think of police officers. They don't really care. They can become so cynical, or just get in the mindset that they just want to lock people up. But that was never me. I really want to stay young mentally and be involved and engaged in what they're doing. I coached a lot of years. I have kids. My kids are in their 20s. I want them to be married and have successful Black relationships and all this stuff, man. But I can't see my son doing it. He don't even look at Black women like that, and it's something, man. But yeah, I really want to try to make things better, just leave my mark and at least leave my voice out there. So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be up here, man. So,
Man. Thank you.
all right. All right. So, we'll leave it off right there. Thank you so much. And that's it.